The low hum of the Boeing 787's engines was instantly drowned out by the sharp, impatient snap of fingers in the hushed first-class cabin. Venetia Morgan lowered her tablet, her eyes narrowing behind thick-rimmed glasses as she assessed the man looming over her. He stood in the aisle, blocking the boarding flow, his tailored navy suit straining against his posture of aggressive entitlement. He didn't ask for seat 1A. He looked at it as if it were a stolen heirloom. Within 10 minutes, armed airport security would swarm the jet bridge. A senior manager would make a fatal career error based on prejudice, and a single quiet phone call would freeze $940 million in corporate assets, grounding a global fleet. But in this moment, the air was thick with the static charge of a storm about to break. The morning sun glared off the tarmac at JFK International Airport, casting long, sharp shadows across the fuselage of Aerolux Flight 404, bound for London Heathrow. Inside the terminal, the chaotic symphony of travel, rolling suitcases, crying infants, and the drone of announcements faded away as Venetia Morgan stepped through the exclusive glass doors of the first-class lounge and onto the jet bridge. Venetia adjusted the lapel of her charcoal blazer. She was a woman who moved with the kind of silence that commanded more attention than noise. At 52, she was the CEO of Meridian Global Logistics, a company that didn't just move packages, it moved economies. But to the casual observer, she was simply a middle-aged black woman traveling alone, dressed in understated, high-quality wool that lacked the flashy logos of the nouveau riche. She found her seat, 1A. It was the prime spot in the cabin, a private suite with sliding doors, gold-trimmed lighting, and a view of the cockpit entrance. She placed her leather briefcase in the overhead bin and settled into the plush leather seat, accepting a glass of sparkling water from a flight attendant named Sarah. "Welcome aboard, Miss Morgan," Sarah said, her smile professional but tight. "We should be pushing back in 20 minutes. Venetia nodded, taking a sip of the water. "Thank you. I have some documents to review before takeoff, so I'd appreciate not being disturbed until we reach cruising altitude." "Of course." Venetia opened her laptop. On the screen was a draft of a renewal contract between Meridian Global and Aerolux International. It was a massive deal, covering the logistics for the airline's maintenance supply chain. Every turbine blade, every landing gear strut, every bolt that kept Aerolux planes in the sky was shipped and managed by Venetia's company. The contract was worth $940 million over 5 years. It was set to auto-renew at midnight, pending her final electronic signature. She was just about to review the liability clause when a commotion at the front of the cabin broke her concentration. "I don't care what the scanner said. I am telling you. That is my seat." The voice was loud, baritone, and dripping with the specific arrogance of someone who had never been told no in his life. Venetia didn't turn around immediately. She kept her eyes on the screen, hoping the flight crew would handle it. "Sir, please," a junior flight attendant stammered. "If you could just check your boarding pass." "I don't need to check my boarding pass," the man shouted, stepping fully into the first-class cabin. Venetia turned her head. The man was tall, with slicked-back blonde hair and a jawline that suggested expensive dentistry. This was Princeton Hall. Venetia recognized him instantly, not from personal acquaintance, but from the business tabloids. He was the son of a textile magnate, a man who had inherited a fortune and spent it trying to build a brand based on lifestyle coaching and high-risk real estate. He was known in the city for 2 things: his lavish parties in the Hamptons and his explosive temper. Princeton ignored the crew and scanned the cabin, his eyes locking on to seat 1A. His face flushed a deep, angry red. "There!" Princeton pointed a manicured finger directly at Venetia. "She's in my seat." Sarah, the senior flight attendant, rushed over, her face pale. "Mr. Hall, please lower your voice. Let me check the manifest." "I book 1A every time I fly Aerolux," Princeton snapped, dropping his carry-on bag with a heavy thud in the middle of the aisle, blocking the path for everyone else. "I am a Platinum Legacy member. My father owns shares in this airline. Do you have any idea who I am?" "We know who you are, sir," Sarah said soothingly, typing furiously on her tablet. "But the manifest shows Ms. Morgan is assigned to 1A. She checked in online yesterday." Princeton scoffed, a wet, dismissive sound. He stepped closer to Venetia's suite, leaning over the partition. Venetia didn't flinch. She simply removed her reading glasses and looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "You," Princeton said, addressing her like she was the help. "You're in the wrong seat. Move." Venetia held his gaze. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Princeton sneered, checking his platinum Rolex. "I have meetings in London. I need the privacy of this suite. You can take my seat in row 4. It's still first class, though barely. Move." "I am not moving," Venetia said, her voice calm, low, and terrifyingly steady. "I paid for this ticket. I selected this seat, and I am currently working." "Paid?" Princeton laughed, looking back at the nervous flight attendants. "With what? Miles? Affirmative action points? Look at her. Does she look like a Platinum Legacy member to you?" The insult hung in the air, toxic and undeniable. The cabin went silent. A businessman in 2A lowered his newspaper. A young influencer in 3A held up her phone, the red recording light blinking silently. Sarah stepped between them, but her body language was telling. She was facing Venetia, not Princeton. "Ms. Morgan," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Mr. Hall is a very frequent flyer with us. Perhaps to avoid a delay you wouldn't mind swapping? Row 4 is very comfortable." Venetia looked at Sarah, disappointment etching lines around her mouth. "Are you asking me to move because of company policy, or because he is shouting?" It would be easier," Sarah pleaded. "Easier for whom?" Venetia asked. "I have a valid ticket. I am seated. If Mr. Hall has a problem with his booking, that is an issue for the gate agent, not me." Princeton slammed his hand onto the partition wall, making Venetia's water glass tremble. "I'm not flying in row 4. Get the gate agent down here. Get the manager. I want this fixed, and I want her off the plane for being disruptive." "Disruptive?" Venetia repeated, raising an eyebrow. She hadn't moved an inch. "You're provoking a VIP," Princeton spat. "That's disruption." Sarah nodded nervously and grabbed the interphone. "I'll call the gate manager." Venetia turned back to her laptop. She saw the contract on the screen. The cursor hovered over the sign button. She slowly moved the mouse away, minimizing the window. If they wanted a war, she would give them one. But she wouldn't fight it with shouting. She would fight it with leverage. 5 minutes later, the heavy thud of boots on the jet bridge signaled the arrival of reinforcements. But it wasn't just security. Leading the charge was a man in a Navy Aerolux blazer with gold epaulets that were slightly too large for his shoulders. His name tag read Todd Reynolds, shift manager. Todd was a man who thrived on petty authority. He walked onto the plane with a clipboard held like a shield, sweat already beading on his forehead. He took one look at Princeton Hall, whose father's company likely sponsored the airline's charity galas, and then looked at Venetia. The calculation in his eyes was instant and transparent. "What seems to be the problem?" Todd asked, though his tone suggested he had already decided on the solution. "The problem," Princeton said, crossing his arms and leaning back against the galley wall, "is that there has been a double booking, and this woman refuses to acknowledge my priority status." Todd turned to Venetia. He didn't greet her. He didn't apologize for the interruption. He simply walked into her personal space. Ma'am, let me see your boarding pass. Venetia unlocked her phone and displayed the QR code. My name is Venetia Morgan, seat 1A, paid full fare, no miles, no upgrades. Todd scanned it with his handheld device. The machine beeped green. Valid. He frowned, tapping the screen. He looked at Princeton, then back at the device. He needed an out. He needed a reason to give the rich white man what he wanted without technically breaking the law. He decided to improvise. Ah, I see the issue, Todd lied, his voice taking on a patronizing, fake customer service lilt. Miss Morgan, it appears there was a glitch in the check-in system. This seat was flagged as out of service due to a mechanical issue with the recline function. It shouldn't have been sold. Venetia pressed the recline button on her armrest. The seat smoothly glided back. She pressed it again, and it returned to the upright position. It seems to be working perfectly, Mr. Reynolds, Venetia said. Todd's face flushed. He hated being corrected. It's an internal sensor issue, ma'am. Electrical. It's a safety hazard. We can't have you sitting here. So you're grounding the seat? Venetia asked. If it's a safety hazard, surely Mr. Hall can't sit here either. Princeton laughed, a sharp, barking sound. I'm willing to take the risk. I'll sign a waiver. Just get her out. Todd nodded, as if this made perfect sense. Mr. Hall is willing to waive the liability. However, since the seat is technically broken in the system, your ticket for 1A is invalid. I'm going to have to reaccommodate you. Reaccommodate me where? Todd tapped on his clipboard. First class is full. Business is full. I have a seat in Economy Plus, row 22. It has extra legroom. The audacity was so breathtaking that Venetia almost laughed. They were kicking her out of a $5,000 suite and shoving her into a middle seat in economy, all to appease a man throwing a tantrum. Let me be clear, Venetia said, closing her laptop with a sharp click. You are removing me from my paid seat, lying about a mechanical failure, and downgrading me involuntarily to accommodate a passenger who boarded after me. I'm following safety protocols, Todd said, his voice hardening. And now I'm also assessing your attitude. You are delaying this flight, Miss Morgan. If you don't grab your bags and move to row 22 immediately, I will have to classify this as a security incident. A security incident? Venetia repeated. Refusing a crew member's instruction is a federal offense, Todd recited, a line he had likely used on drunk tourists many times. I can have Port Authority escort you off the plane, and you will be placed on the internal no-fly list. You'll be stranded in New York. Is that what you want? Behind Todd, 2 airport police officers waited by the cockpit door. They looked bored, hands resting near their belts. They weren't there to investigate the truth. They were there to enforce the manager's will. Venetia looked at Princeton. He was smirking, checking his reflection in the bulkhead mirror, adjusting his tie. He had won. He knew he would win. The system was built for him. She looked at Sarah, the flight attendant, who looked down at her shoes, unable to meet Venetia's gaze. Venetia took a deep breath. She could refuse. She could let them drag her off in handcuffs. It would make a great news story. But Venetia Morgan didn't play for the news cycle. She played for the kill. And you couldn't kill a beast from inside a jail cell. You needed to be free to make the phone call. Fine, Venetia said softly. Princeton clapped his hands together. Finally. Some sense. I will move. Venetia stood up, smoothing her skirt. She reached for her briefcase. But I want it noted on the record that I am moving under duress and threat of law enforcement action. Noted, Todd said dismissively, already printing out a new boarding pass from his mobile printer. Row 22, seat B, middle, enjoy your flight. Venetia took the flimsy piece of thermal paper. She didn't look at Princeton as she stepped into the aisle. She walked past him, and he leaned in, whispering loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Know your place?" Venetia stopped. For a fraction of a second, the rage flared hot and white behind her eyes. But she swallowed it, pushing it down into the cold, calculating part of her brain where she kept her business strategies. "I do know my place, Mr. Hall," Venetia said, her voice icy. "I really do." She turned and began the long walk down the aisle. The walk from row 1 to row 22 felt like a funeral procession for her dignity. As Venetia passed through the business-class cabin, heads turned. The whispers were audible. "Is that her? Why are they moving her?" She must have done something. Maybe her credit card bounced. She kept her head high, her gaze fixed on the exit sign at the back of the plane. She passed the curtain into economy. The air here was stale, warmer than in the front. The overhead bins were jammed full. Babies were crying. She found row 22. Seat B was sandwiched between a teenager listening to loud trap music on leaky headphones and an elderly man who was already asleep and encroaching on her armrest. "Excuse me," Venetia murmured, squeezing into the narrow space. She sat down, clutching her laptop bag to her chest because there was no room in the bins. The seat did not recline. The legroom was non-existent. From the front of the plane, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the slight delay. We had a minor passenger issue to sort out, but we are now cleared for pushback. Flight time to London is 6 hours and 40 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the award-winning service of Aerolux." Venetia didn't relax. She waited until the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign pinged off. She didn't buy the Wi-Fi package. She had her own global satellite hotspot, a prototype from her company's tech division. She opened her laptop. The contract was still there on the screen. Master Logistics Service Agreement, Aerolux International and Meridian Global. She opened a new window and logged into the Meridian Global Secure mainframe. She typed in her executive clearance code, V. Morgan, CEO, Alpha 1. The dashboard loaded. It showed a live map of the world. Thousands of green dots represented Meridian ships, trucks, and cargo planes moving goods across the globe. She filtered the search. Client, Aerolux International. The screen populated with hundreds of active shipments. Shipment, Norfe 4092, Rolls-Royce turbine blades, in transit to Heathrow maintenance hangar. Critical status. Shipment, 18821, landing gear hydraulic assemblies, in transit to JFK hub. Critical status. Shipment, Lobwamzalun 2, avionics suites, sitting in Dubai port. Aerolux operated on a just-in-time supply chain. They didn't warehouse parts. They relied on Meridian to deliver them exactly when needed. It saved the airline millions in storage fees, but it made them incredibly vulnerable. If the supply chain stopped, the maintenance schedules failed. If maintenance failed, planes couldn't be certified to fly. Venetia pulled up the contact list for the Aerolux board of directors. At the top of the list was Arthur Kensington, the chairman. Venetia had known Arthur for 10 years. They had played golf in Martha's Vineyard. He was a decent man, but he was passive. He let people like Princeton Hall's father run roughshod over the company culture. She took out her phone. She didn't call Arthur yet. First, she needed to set the stage. She navigated to the contract renewal page. Status, awaiting signature. She moved her cursor to the Decline button. A warning box popped up. Are you sure? Declining this contract will trigger an immediate cessation of services. All active shipments will be halted or returned to origin. Penalty clauses for the client will activate immediately. Venetia clicked yes. The screen flashed red. Contract terminated. Then she went back to the live logistics map. She selected all active Aerolux shipments. Command: freeze in transit, return to depot, hold for payment audit. She hit enter. On the screen, hundreds of green dots turned red. In the belly of the very plane she was sitting on, there was likely a crate of avionics headed for London. Technically, that crate was now illegally on board, as the carriage contract had just been voided. Venetia watched the red dots blink. It would take about 15 minutes for the automated systems in the logistics centers to alert the human operators. Then, the calls would start. She put her headphones on, opened a playlist of classical music, and waited. Up in first class, Princeton Hall was likely sipping champagne, toasting to his victory. He had no idea that the woman in 22B had just cut the fuel line to his entire world. 3,000 miles away, in the cavernous expanse of Hangar 6 at London Heathrow, the consequences of Venetia. Morgan's keystroke began to materialize with the brutal efficiency of a guillotine. Chief Engineer Robert McIntyre was wiping grease from his hands, looking up at the exposed engine of a Boeing 777-300ER. The massive GE90 engine was missing a critical high-pressure compressor vane. The bird was grounded until that part was installed. This plane was scheduled to fly the lucrative London to Dubai route in 4 hours. A delay meant refunding 300 passengers and losing a gate slot that cost more than Robert made in a year. "Where is the Meridian truck?" Robert barked at his junior mechanic. "GPS says it's at the gate, Chief," the mechanic replied, looking at his tablet. "Just clearing security now." Robert looked out the hangar doors. Sure enough, the distinctive matte black van of Meridian Global Logistics was pulling up to the checkpoint. Robert sighed in relief. Venetia Morgan's company was known for military precision. They were never late. But then, something strange happened. The van stopped at the barrier. The driver leaned out to scan his ID. Suddenly, the driver froze. He pulled a handheld device from the dashboard, looked at it, and shook his head. He exchanged words with the security guard, then put the van in reverse. "What is he doing?" Robert yelled, dropping his rag. "Hey, stop!" He watched in horror as the van executed a 3-point turn and accelerated away from the hangar, merging back onto the perimeter road, heading for the exit. "Get them on the phone!" Robert screamed. "They have my turbine blade!" The junior mechanic dialed the Meridian Priority dispatch line. He put it on speaker. "Thank you for calling Meridian Global Logistics. Please be advised that due to a contractual termination event, all service to account number 88042, Aerolux International, has been suspended effective immediately. All assets are being returned to secure holding. Good day." The line went dead. Robert stared at the phone. "Service suspended? That's impossible. We have a 10-year contract." He didn't know it yet, but the same scene was playing out in Frankfurt, Tokyo, Dubai, and Los Angeles. In Frankfurt, a Meridian cargo plane loaded with Aerolux catering supplies, 5 tons of champagne, caviar, and frozen meals, taxied off the runway just seconds before takeoff, returning to the cargo bay. In Los Angeles, a fleet of trucks carrying replacement tires for the A320 fleet pulled into a rest stop, locked their trailers, and the drivers simply walked away, following the asset freeze protocol sent to their devices. The supply chain of Aerolux, a complex arterial system that kept the massive airline alive, had just suffered a massive cardiac arrest. The Aerolux headquarters in downtown Chicago was a glass and steel monolith designed to project power and stability. On the 40th floor, in the Network Operations Control Center, NOCC, the mood was anything but stable. The NOC was the brain of the airline. A massive wall of screens displayed every flight, every weather system, and every maintenance issue in real time. Usually the board was a soothing mix of green and yellow. At 10:15 a.m., the board turned red. Lawrence Gentry, the vice president of operations, stormed out of his office. His tie loosened. Why am I getting calls that Hangar 4 at JFK is paralyzed? Why are the mechanics claiming they can't access the inventory system? It's not just JFK, sir, a senior analyst shouted from his station. It's everywhere. Heathrow, Haneda, O'Hare. The Meridian portal is locked. We can't order parts. We can't even track the parts we already paid for. Is it a hack? Lawrence demanded. Did we get hit with ransomware? It doesn't look like a hack, the analyst said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The error code is specific. Code 99. Contract termination by client. Who terminated it? Us? No, sir. Them. Meridian. Lawrence felt a cold sweat prickle on his neck. Meridian didn't just terminate contracts. They were a strategic partner. This was an act of war. Get Arthur Kensington on the line. Now. 10 minutes later, Arthur Kensington, the chairman of Aerolux, burst into the room. He was a man of 60, silver-haired and usually unflappable, but his face was ashen. I just tried to call Venetia Morgan, Arthur said, breathless. Straight to voicemail. Her executive assistant told me she's unavailable due to travel. What the hell is going on, Lawrence? We have 40 planes grounded. The stock has dropped 4% in the last 20 minutes. The market thinks we're insolvent. We traced the termination command, the head of IT said, projecting a log onto the main screen. It originated at 10:02 a.m. Eastern Time. The user ID is vmorgan CEO Alpha 1. Venetia did this herself? Arthur stared at the screen. Why? We were due to renew today. The deal was done. Look at the IP address, the IT head said. It's not from her office in Manhattan. It's a mobile satellite signal. It's coming from one of our planes. The room went silent. What? Arthur whispered. The signal is coming from Flight 404, JFK to London, departed 40 minutes ago. Arthur blinked, his brain racing to catch up. Venetia is on Flight 404. She's coming to London to sign the deal in person. Then why did she kill the contract mid-flight? Pull up the manifest, Lawrence barked. Find me Venetia Morgan. The analyst typed in the name. Here she is. Venetia Morgan. Seat 1A, first class. Arthur exhaled. Okay, she's in first. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she hit the wrong button. Get the captain on the SATCOM. Tell him to go back to seat 1A, hand Ms. Morgan the phone, and let me talk to her. We need to fix this before the market closes. Wait, the analyst said, squinting at the screen. There's a modification note on the ticket, updated at the gate. What kind of modification? The analyst clicked the file open. His eyes went wide. He looked up at Arthur, fear genuine in his eyes. Sir, she's not in 1A anymore. The system shows an involuntary downgrade. Reason? Broken seat. Reassigned to... The analyst swallowed hard. Row 22. Seat B. Economy. You have to be joking, Arthur said, his voice trembling. We put the CEO of a billion-dollar partner in a middle seat in economy. Who is in 1A? Lawrence asked sharply. The analyst checked. Princeton Hall. Platinum legacy status. Looks like an override was authorized by the gate manager, Todd Reynolds. Arthur Kensington closed his eyes. He saw the whole picture instantly. The arrogance of Princeton Hall, the weakness of a gate manager, the utter humiliation of a woman like Venetia Morgan. He knew Venetia. She was a woman of immense pride and lethal intelligence. She hadn't terminated the contract by mistake. She had done it because they had treated her like garbage. Oh my God, Arthur whispered. She didn't just cancel the contract. She's holding the company hostage from row 22. "Sir, we're losing $2 million an hour," Lawrence said. "What do we do?" Arthur opened his eyes. The fury in them was terrifying. "Contact the captain of Flight 404. Tell him this is a code red. I don't care if he's serving dinner. I don't care if there is turbulence. He is to find Venetia Morgan, and he is to apologize as if his life depends on it. Because our lives do depend on it." "And tell him," Arthur added, his voice dropping to a growl, "to get Princeton Hall out of that seat. At 35,000 feet over the dark, churning expanse of the Atlantic, the atmosphere inside the first-class cabin of Aerolux Flight 404 was one of hermetically sealed perfection. The lighting had been dialed down to a soothing twilight violet, designed to mimic a sunset and regulate circadian rhythms. The air was scrubbed clean and scented with notes of white tea and bergamot, masking the mechanical reality of the machine hurtling through the stratosphere. Princeton Hall was fully reclined in Seat 1A, the suite he had conquered. He had changed into the airline's complimentary charcoal silk pajamas, leaving his tailored suit hanging in the private wardrobe. His socks were off, his feet resting on the leather ottoman, and he held a crystal flute of Dom Perignon 2012 by the stem, swirling the golden liquid lazily. On the 24-inch 4K screen in front of him, an action movie played on mute, explosions blooming in silence, while he listened to a podcast about offshore tax havens on his noise-cancelling headphones. He felt fantastic. A warm buzz of satisfaction hummed in his chest, distinct from the champagne. It was the thrill of dominance. He had exerted his will, and the world, specifically the rigid, rule-bound world of commercial aviation, had bent to accommodate him. The woman, whose face he had already forgotten, was back in the cattle class where she belonged. It wasn't about the seat, he told himself as he took a sip. It was about the natural order of things. He was a Hall. He didn't ask for things. He announced his requirements, and they were met. Sarah, the senior flight attendant, walked past his suite with a silver tray. Her posture was rigid, her movements lacking their usual fluid grace. She looked stressed, her eyes darting toward the galley interphone every few seconds. Princeton lowered his headphones to his neck. "Sarah, darling," he drawled, "top me off, and bring those warm chocolate chip cookies. I'm feeling peckish." Sarah stopped. She forced a smile, but it was brittle, terrified. I'm afraid the ovens are currently offline, Mr. Hall." Princeton frowned, the spell of perfection cracking slightly. "Offline? What do you mean offline? This is a brand new Dreamliner. It's a flying computer." "We're experiencing some technical system anomalies," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper as if she were confessing a crime. "The entertainment system in economy has shut down completely. The galley inventory sensors aren't responding. We're trying to reset the breakers." Princeton rolled his eyes, a dramatic sigh escaping him. "Fine. Just bring the nuts. And make sure they're warm, at least." "I'll do my best, sir," Sarah said, hurrying away before he could make another demand. Princeton shook his head, putting his headphones back on. Incompetence, he thought. Everywhere you look. He didn't notice that the ambient cabin lighting flickered once, then stabilized. He didn't notice that the fasten seatbelt sign lit up, not with the polite singular ding of turbulence, but with a sharp, urgent double chime that signaled a crew alert. 60 feet forward, behind the reinforced steel door of the cockpit, the atmosphere was not one of luxury, but of controlled panic. Captain David Miller was staring at the ASARS, Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, screen in the center console. His hands, usually steady enough to land a 300-ton jet in a crosswind, were gripping the armrests of his chair. The message from Chicago headquarters was blinking in urgent, jagged red text against the black screen. It was a Priority 1 alert, the kind usually reserved for bomb threats or hijackings. Priority, critical code, read from CEO Arthur Kensington to Captfail T404. Subject, immediate action, required message, locate Pax Venetia Morgan, seat 22B. Immediate upgrade required. Apologize profusely. She has terminated Meridian Global Logistics Supply contract. Fleet is grounded worldwide. Maintenance chain paralyzed. You must fix this. Remove Pax Hall, 1A, if necessary. Do whatever she asks. The future of the airline depends on this conversation. Captain Miller read the message twice. He looked at his first officer, a young man named Evans, whose face had drained of all color. "Is this a joke?" Miller whispered, his voice rough. "The fleet is grounded because of a passenger in 22B? "Meridian Global," Evans said, his eyes wide. "That's the logistics giant. My brother works in procurement for Delta. He says Meridian is the supply chain. If they pull the plug, we don't have spare parts. We don't have hydraulic fluid. We don't have fuel contracts in half our international ports." Evans swallowed hard, looking at the captain. "Dave, if this is real, the airline is bleeding out right now. Millions by the minute." Captain Miller felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He thought about his pension. He thought about the 12,000 employees mentioned in the quarterly newsletter. He thought about the woman he had allowed his gate manager to downgrade. He hadn't seen her, but he had signed off on the manifest change, trusting Todd Reynolds's judgment. "Broken seat," Reynolds had said. "Safety hazard." It wasn't a broken seat, Miller realized aloud, the anger rising like bile. It was a lie. He unbuckled his 5-point harness, the metal clasps clicking loudly in the quiet cockpit. "I have the flight controls," Evans said automatically, his hands moving to the yoke. "You have the controls," Miller confirmed, standing up and grabbing his cap. He adjusted his tie, checking his reflection in the dark glass of the side window. He didn't look like the friendly, welcome aboard pilot right now. He looked like a man marching to a funeral, possibly his own. "What are you going to do?" Evans asked. "I'm going to go back there," Miller said grimly, "and I'm going to beg for our lives." Captain Miller opened the cockpit door and stepped into the galley. Sarah jumped, nearly dropping a bottle of water. "Captain," she gasped. Miller ignored the question. He stepped into the first-class cabin. The hush was immediate. He walked past the sleeping pods, his eyes locking onto the back of Princeton Hall's head in seat 1A. Princeton sensed the presence and turned, beaming a smile that was all teeth and entitlement. "Captain, good to see you. Smooth ride so far, despite the tech glitches. Shame about the ovens, though. A man needs his cookies." Captain Miller stopped. He looked down at Princeton Hall. The urge to physically drag the man out of the seat was so strong that Miller's hands balled into fists at his sides. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to look away. He couldn't engage yet. If he spoke to Princeton now, he would lose his job for assault. He turned to Sarah, who was trembling by the galley wall. "Where is she?" Miller asked, his voice low and dangerous. Who do you mean, Captain?" "Venetia Morgan, the passenger from this seat. Where is she?" Sarah swallowed, pointing a shaking finger toward the rear of the aircraft. "She's in economy, sir. Row 22, seat B, the middle seat." Miller closed his eyes for a brief second. The middle seat. They had put the CEO of a billion-dollar partner, a woman capable of freezing global trade, in a middle seat. "Come with me," Miller commanded, "and bring a bottle of the best wine we have. Not the open stuff for service. A full, sealed vintage bottle, and 2 glasses. "Captain," Princeton interrupted again, sensing he was being deliberately ignored. He pulled one side of his headphones off. "Is there a problem? You look intense." Captain Miller turned his head slowly. He looked at Princeton with a mixture of profound contempt and icy clarity. "Yes, Mr. Hall," Miller said, his voice carrying through the cabin. "There is a massive problem, and you are sitting in the middle of it." Before Princeton could respond, Miller turned on his heel and marched through the curtain, leaving the billionaire heir with his mouth open. The walk through the plane was a descent into purgatory. Miller passed through the business-class cabin, where passengers slept under duvets. Then he crossed the threshold into economy. The air here was heavier, warmer, smelling of humanity and stale coffee. The overhead bins were jammed, the aisles were narrow. The in-flight entertainment screens were all black, victims of the system crash. Babies were crying, their wails cutting through the drone of the engines. He reached row 22. It was a tight squeeze. To his left, a teenager was bobbing his head to music leaking from cheap headphones. To his right, an elderly man was asleep, his elbow jutting deep into the middle seat's territory. And there, sandwiched in the middle, sat Venetia Morgan. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't watching a movie. She wasn't sulking. She was working. Her laptop was open on the tray table, barely fitting in the space. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with rhythmic, efficient strokes. She sat with her back perfectly straight, preserving her personal space through sheer force of will. She looked like a queen in exile, maintaining her court in a dungeon. She looked up as the captain's shadow fell over her. Her expression didn't change. She didn't look surprised. She looked like she had been checking her watch, waiting for this exact moment. "Ms. Morgan?" Miller said. He had to raise his voice slightly to be heard over the engine roar. Venetia removed one earbud slowly. She looked at his 4 stripes, then at his face. "Yes, Captain?" I am Captain David Miller." Miller did something then that caused the passengers in rows 21 through 23 to stop what they were doing and stare. He crouched down in the aisle, ignoring the dirt on the carpet, bringing himself to eye level with her. It was a position of submission, of supplication. "Ms. Morgan, I have just received a priority message from our chairman, Arthur Kensington." "Oh," Venetia said politely, her tone conversational, as if they were meeting at a garden party and not in row 22. "How is Arthur? I haven't spoken to him since the charity golf tournament in Martha's Vineyard last August. I hope he's well." The casual mention of her personal relationship with the chairman hit Miller like a physical blow. It highlighted just how badly his team had miscalculated. He is extremely distressed, ma'am," Miller said, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "Ms. Morgan, on behalf of Aerolux, I want to offer my deepest, most sincere apologies for the way you were treated at JFK. It was a mistake, a terrible, grievous failure of our standards." Venetia looked at him, her dark eyes unreadable behind her glasses. "It didn't seem like a mistake, Captain. Your manager, Mr. Reynolds, was quite clear. He told me the seat was broken. A safety hazard, I believe he called it. He was very specific about the protocols." Miller winced. "Mr. Reynolds was wrong, and he will be dealt with. But right now, Ms. Morgan, I am begging you, please, the chairman says you have terminated a contract?" "I did," Venetia said simply. "No boast, no threat, just a fact." "Ma'am, half our fleet is grounded," Miller pleaded, his voice cracking slightly. "We have cargo rotting on the tarmac in Frankfurt. The stock has dropped significantly. Thousands of people. My crew, the mechanics, the baggage handlers, they could lose their jobs if this stands. This airline cannot function without Meridian." Venetia paused. She stopped typing. She looked at the young teenager next to her, then turned around to look at the row behind her. In seat 23B, a young mother was rocking a crying infant, looking exhausted, cramped, and miserable. Venetia turned back to the captain. Her voice dropped, becoming harder, sharper. "I employ 12,000 people too, Captain. My job is to protect their dignity and the integrity of my company. When your airline decided that my money, my status, and my contract were worth less than a man's ego because of how I look, you broke the trust required for a partnership. I don't do business with companies that disrespect me. It is bad for the bottom line." "I understand," Miller said. "I truly do. But please, let us make it right. Come back to first class. Take your seat. Mr. Kensington is on the sat phone waiting to speak with you. We will fix this." Venetia closed her laptop with a soft snap. She considered it. The point had been made. The stock hit would be a permanent scar on Aerolux's financials. The message had been received loud and clear, but she wasn't done teaching the lesson. "I will speak to Arthur," Venetia said, "but I have conditions, 3 of them." "Name them," Miller said instantly. "Anything." "First," Venetia said, holding up a finger, "I want a public apology from the airline, not a private voucher, a press release, admitting the bias." "Done," Miller said. "I'll authorize the draft myself." "Second," Venetia continued, "I want the man in seat 1A removed from that seat. I don't care where you put him. Put him in the cargo hold for all I care. But he does not stay in my seat." Miller nodded grimly, a flash of satisfaction crossing his face. "Consider it done. It will be my pleasure." "And third," Venetia said. She turned in her seat and pointed to the woman behind her, the exhausted mother bouncing the crying baby. "This woman and her child take his place in first class. I'll take seat 1B. I want to watch him move. I want him to see that his comfort is not a right, but a privilege that can be revoked." Miller blinked. He looked at the mother, then back at Venetia. It was unconventional. It was vindictive. It was absolutely perfect poetic justice. "We can do that," Miller said. He stood up, offering his hand to Venetia. "We can absolutely do that." Venetia didn't take his hand immediately. She gathered her things, sliding her laptop into her bag with deliberate grace. Then she stood up, smoothing her skirt. In the cramped aisle of economy, she looked taller than the captain. "Let's go, Miss Morgan," Miller said, gesturing toward the front of the plane. "After you, Captain," she replied. "I believe I have a seat to reclaim." Princeton Hall sat in the plush solitude of seat 1A, but the champagne in his glass had gone warm, and the silence in the cabin no longer felt like exclusivity. It felt like quarantine. The atmosphere had shifted imperceptibly at first, then violently. 10 minutes ago, flight attendants were catering to his every whim. Now, they walked past his suite with eyes fixed firmly on the floor, their movements stiff and hurried. He pressed the call button for the 3rd time. The blue light chimed above his head, a hollow sound that went unanswered. He pulled his phone from his pocket, desperate for a distraction. But the Wi-Fi icon remained grayed out. A flicker of genuine unease began to curl in his gut. He was Princeton Hall. The world wasn't supposed to stop working for him. He looked around the cabin, seeking an ally, but the other first-class passengers were studiously ignoring him. The businessman in 2A was engrossed in a magazine that he hadn't turned the page of in 20 minutes. The silence was heavy, pressurized, like the air before a lightning strike. Then, the heavy velvet curtain separating the galley from the cabin was ripped aside with a sound like tearing canvas. Princeton looked up, his mouth opening to complain about the service, but the words died in his throat. Captain David Miller marched into the cabin, his presence filling the aisle. He didn't look like an airline pilot anymore. He looked like a military officer entering a court-martial, but it was the figure behind him, that made Princeton's blood run cold. Venetia Morgan stood beside the captain. She had shed the invisibility of the victim. She stood tall, her expression devoid of anger, but terrifyingly composed. She looked at Princeton not with hatred, but with the clinical detachment of a surgeon about to excise a tumor. "Captain!" Princeton tried to laugh, but it came out as a nervous, high-pitched wheeze. "She's back? Did she finally realize she didn't belong in the zoo back there?" Captain Miller didn't slow down. He stopped directly at the edge of the suite, looming over the seated man. He placed one hand on the partition, leaning in close enough that Princeton could see the vein pulsing in the pilot's temple. "Mr. Hall," Miller said, his voice low and vibrating with suppressed fury. "Get up." Princeton blinked, stunned by the direct command. "Excuse me?" "I think you're confused. I'm a Platinum Legacy." "I am not confused, and I don't care if you're the King of England," Miller interrupted, his voice booming loud enough to snap heads in the back rows. "You are disrupting the safety, operation, and financial solvency of this flight. We have confirmed that the mechanical error, cited earlier, was a fabrication authorized by a manager who has effectively been terminated. This seat is not yours. It never was. It belongs to Ms. Morgan." Princeton felt the eyes of the entire cabin on him. His face burned hot. "You can't be serious. You're going to humiliate me over a computer glitch?" "My father owns shares in this airline. I will sue you. I will have your license." "You have two choices, Mr. Hall," Miller said, ignoring the threat entirely. "You can vacate this seat voluntarily and take seat 22B, or I can have federal law enforcement meet us at the gate in London. You will be arrested for interfering with a flight crew and causing a commercial crisis. And trust me, with the mood the airline is in right now, they will press charges, and they will make them stick." Princeton looked around frantically. The influencer in 3A was holding her phone up openly now, the red recording light unblinking. The businessman in 2A was grinning, enjoying the show. Princeton scrambled for leverage, for anything to stop the walls from closing in. "This is insane," he hissed, gripping the armrests. "You're destroying your career for her?" Venetia stepped forward. She moved smoothly into Princeton's line of sight, blocking his view of the captain. She adjusted her glasses, her voice dropping to a register that was soft, lethal, and absolute. "Your father is Richard Hall, CEO of Hall Textiles, correct?" Venetia asked. Princeton scoffed. "Everyone knows who he is." "Good," Venetia nodded. "Then you should also know that Hall Textiles ships 90% of its raw cotton and finished goods through Meridian Global Logistics. Your entire supply chain, from the mills in Bangladesh to the distribution centers in Jersey, runs on my ships and my planes." Princeton froze. The color drained from his face so fast it left him looking grey. "If you do not move from that seat in the next 10 seconds, Venetia continued, checking her watch, "I will add Hall Textiles to the global blacklist. Your father won't be able to ship a single T-shirt. His inventory will rot in the ports. His stock will crash. And when he asks me why, I will tell him it was because his son didn't know his place." The silence that followed was absolute. Princeton looked at Venetia, really seeing her for the first time. He didn't see a woman he could dismiss anymore. He saw a titan. He saw the person who held the strings to his family's fortune, and he realized with a sickening lurch that he had just handed her a pair of scissors. Slowly, with trembling hands, Princeton unbuckled his seatbelt. The click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. He grabbed his carry-on bag, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. "This isn't over," he muttered, trying to salvage a shred of dignity as he squeezed past them into the aisle. "It is for you," Venetia replied, turning her back on him before he had even taken a step. Princeton began the long walk. It was a walk of agony. As he passed through the business class curtain, he heard snickers. As he entered economy, the air felt stifling. He saw row 22 looming ahead, a middle seat between a teenager blasting trap music and a man who was snoring with his mouth open. He jammed his bag under the seat and collapsed into the narrow space, realizing that money, in the face of true power, was utterly worthless. Back in first class, the energy had transformed. Venetia stood by the empty suite, but she didn't sit down. She turned to the aisle behind her, where Captain Miller had guided the young mother from row 23. The woman was clutching her baby, her eyes wide with fear and confusion, still thinking she was in trouble. "Please," Venetia said, her voice softening instantly as she gestured to the empty suite, the leather still warm. "Take seat 1A. It has a bassinet for the baby. You'll both be able to sleep." The woman's mouth fell open. She looked from the luxury suite to the captain, then to Venetia. Tears welled in her eyes. "Me? But, Mom, I didn't pay for this. I can't afford. It's taken care of," Venetia said, smiling for the first time since she boarded. "Consider it an apology from the airline." As the flight attendants rushed over to help the stunned mother settle in, treating her with the reverence of royalty, Venetia sat down in 1B. She opened her laptop and connected to the cockpit's secure satellite link. She video-called Arthur Kensington. Arthur's face appeared on the screen instantly. He looked haggard, his tie undone, the background of the chaos-filled war room visible behind him. "Venetia," Arthur croaked, relief washing over his features. "Thank God. Please tell me you can reverse it. The board is screaming at me." "I can," Venetia said, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "But Todd Reynolds is fired. Today. No severance." "He's already being escorted out of the building," Arthur promised. "And I want a complete review of your VIP protocols. I want bias training mandatory for every employee, from the check-in desk to the boardroom." "We will hire your firm to lead the training," Arthur said, desperation in his voice. "Whatever you want, Venetia. Just please, unlock the system." Venetia typed a final command into her terminal. Command: restore contract. Lift suspension. Resume operations. She hit enter. "It's done, Arthur," she said quietly. "The systems should come back online in 5 minutes. Your planes can fly." She ended the call. The tension that had held her rigid for the last hour finally released. She leaned back in the seat, closing her eyes. Sarah appeared instantly at her side, holding a fresh glass of vintage champagne, her hands trembling slightly. "Miss Morgan," Sarah whispered. "Thank you." Venetia took the glass, nodding once. She looked over at seat 1A. The young mother was already asleep, exhausted, and the baby was resting peacefully in the fold-down crib, oblivious to the war that had been fought for his comfort. The Boeing 787 soared on toward London, the engines humming a steady rhythm. The balance of the universe, for a brief, shining moment, had been restored. Venetia took a sip of champagne, savoring the taste of cold, hard justice. The story of Flight 404 became a legend in the corporate world, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms from New York to Tokyo. It reminded everyone that power isn't about who shouts the loudest or who wears the most expensive suit. True power is often silent, unassuming, and capable of bringing the world to a halt with a single phone call. Venetia Morgan didn't just reclaim her seat. She reclaimed her dignity and taught an entire industry a lesson in respect. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice and instant karma, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about underdogs who bite back. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that you should never judge a book by its cover, or a CEO by her seat number. Thanks for watching.